Hello, AI Wizard here. So we are going to continue on understanding what happens when you open your AI chat, like ChatGPT, and you drag and drop PDF into it, and how can we make sure that you can chat with your PDF reliably. So in the previous videos, we covered two things. First, we covered that the most basic approach for you to be able to chat with your PDF is to basically have a PDF, send it to AI chat. Behind the scenes, it will extract the text from PDF and then it will feed it to context window. So that approach is similar to if you, let's say, have a PDF, you select all the text and then you just paste it to AI chat. So AI chat will have the entire content of PDF in the chat history, so it will be able to refer to it, and we call that context window. Now, we also covered a prerequisite for this episode where we covered something called embedding. So embedding, which will come up later here in the video too, we covered what it is, and it's basically a numerical representation of the data, of the text, for AI, for computers to be able to connect similar words to each other. So for example, if we're talking about tool for nails, the hammer is also a related word. And maybe axe, which is also a tool, may be also kind of related to the word tool, but further compared to hammer, because hammer is more closer to tool for nails. Now, I already covered that in the previous video, so you should watch that before you can watch this video, okay? It's a bit more complicated. I tried my best to explain to you. And again, if you are not clear on any of this, just leave a comment. I will try to explain in a better way to the best of my abilities, okay? So now let's just move on. So in the first episode here, we already covered that we need to extract text and feed it to context window. Now, I said that there is a problem with that. The problem is that context window is limited in size, which means that if, let's say, you have a very, very large PDF, the AI will simply not be able to handle that amount of text. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's some documents about law, maybe it's some company policies, which can be thousands, 2000s, a lot of pages, right? So how do we solve that problem, basically? Now, there is multiple parts, but essentially I'm going to kind of like explain to you very shortly first what we need. We need a certain storage. So somewhere where we can put our text that we extract, okay? So the text extraction, in any case, it doesn't go anywhere, okay? And we already covered the context window method, so I'm just going to delete this box. So the text extraction will be always there, okay? No matter what, when we have PDF, we have to somehow extract the text from PDF. And it's just done with different tools and technologies. It's basically a code that is written by software developers, okay? It's just a logic that is usually built into AI chats like ChatGPT, right? Now, once we extract the text, instead of directly going and feeding it to AI chat, like feeding into context window, since it's limited in size, we need some sort of storage. So we're basically putting aside that text somewhere, and usually we store that in something called RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation database. So which means that we kind of, like, in a simple words, I would say, we have AI chat, which would be a librarian, for example. Now the RAG would be the library. So librarian might not necessarily know everything about every single book. It might not necessarily know the contents of each of the books. But what RAG, library, will allow librarian, AI chat, to do is when you ask it something, it can go ahead and find that book that you are looking for, and then maybe open that book and basically try to find the text that you are searching for, and then it can give you some answers about the questions that you are asking. Okay, now why it kind of solves the problem of limited context window is that we can store a lot of data into RAC, because RAC is basically a storage, a database. It's just stored somewhere else, like outside of context window, outside of AI chat, on normal traditional, as you can imagine, like disks, for example, right? And the disks now, like, you know, the memory is cheap, right? So terabytes of data, we can just store it there. Okay? And the AI chat will be able to, on demand, go and try to find some information in the RAC. Again, you can think about this as librarian. So AI chat will be librarian here. And then the RAC would be the library, because it can basically search through the books, then open the books, read the books, and give you the answer that it needs. Of course, much faster than the human librarian would do, right? Okay, so that would be like a high level overview, and let's try to kind of like go into details a little bit more here, because there are some nuances here. So first of all, we need to create something called embedding. Now, why do we create the embedding? I have already explained it in the previous video, so make sure you watch that. But it basically allows computer to be able to search for something much faster and easier. So, for example, you ask a question about PDF. As I already said, since this is a librarian, he needs to search for something first, right? So there are lots of books, and it's not easy to basically find, like, it's not easy to find what you want, right? So embedding kind of helps librarian to be able to find that content. And that's why, like, again, I already explained that, but that's why we convert this text into numbers, essentially. It's just that for computer, it's easier to deal with that, okay? So we have a certain layer. Okay, let's just call it a computer, right? So this is just a code, again, just some program developed by software developer, okay, to be able to find. So AI chat would first try to search for something, which would go to RAC, okay? So I'm going to draw it up a little bit more nicely in a bit. But first, once we have embedding, essentially what we want to do is basically save it to RAC. And then what will happen once we save embedding into RAC, again, the flow would be AI. You ask something about your PDF with your AI chat. It will refer to the computer, to the program, to search for that. So it will go to RAC. And then once it gets some results, it will return it back. And then computer will basically return the results to AI chat. And then AI chat can check the results and give you the answer, okay? Very simple. However, creating embeddings, first of all, is not a simple task. So in order to be able to create an embeddings, you need to also run it through LLM. Why? Because when you convert the text into the numbers, you need to make sure that the LLM actually understands what are those numerical numbers. And again, because let's just say this text is being converted into numbers using LLM, using AI. And as we said, because AI has a very limited context window, we hit the same problem. So if we extract thousands of pages of PDF, we have a lot of text, and we try to embed it, which also makes us use AI LLM, right? It won't be able to do that because the data is too big. So basically, if we are more clear here, we can just define it as done by LLM as well, okay? So this is kind of like high level overview, okay? So we cannot just embed, which means convert this text into numbers directly, right? Because we have too much text. So the first thing that we need to do, right? We need to chunk it, which means we need to split, let's call it chunk, or split our text into smaller pieces. Once we split it into smaller pieces, then each individual piece we can then convert to embedding, which we then can store into RAG. Okay? So chunking, the most naive approach, the way it's done, is you just chunk it by the amount of characters, for example. So you know that you can embed 100 characters, so you just divide your text by 100 characters, and it's all done via code. So not really complicated. However, let me tell you something about embedding. Embedding quality, the quality of your embedding, so the quality of the numbers that come out of your text, will influence a lot the performance of your AI chat, the accuracy of how it gives you the replies. Why? Because it will affect a lot the quality of the results, how nicely, how accurately it actually searches through your PDF. So that's basically makes it important that your embeddings are nicely done. And for embedding to be prepared in a nice way, we need to make sure that our text, the chunks, actually not the text, but the chunks, the resulting chunks, are somewhat related to each other. So in an example, so if let's say we have a heading here, that would have some paragraphs, so we have some content, okay? So hierarchical structure would be like this, and then we would have a subheading here. And then we would also have some content here. And then say we have heading 2, okay? Heading 2, okay. Then we would have like another content here, okay? So that would be our structure of our PDF. Now, here we can kind of see that this content is related to this heading, right? So this can be considered as one section. Then we can also see that subheading is a part of this heading. So we can also assume that this is one section. Then subheading has the content as well. So we can also assume that this is also one section. So they would probably logically be related to each other, right? So this is entire section. Then we have this section. Then we have this section, okay? And then this would be a separate section as well. So they would be logically related to each other. In some cases, you might even find references. So this would be the content that references heading 1, right? Okay? So we might have like a structure of PDF like similar to this, which makes it clear that we should try to chunk it by sections. So the chunk, the more connected it is. So basically if you randomly chunk it, if you randomly split it by characters, as I explained just now, you might have parts of different sections being in one chunk. So for example, here, maybe we will include this part and also include the heading, but then we don't include the content. So this would be, for example, the first chunk. Okay, let's imagine we split it by characters and we count it up and we got this part. And then we got this part as a second chunk. Now, you see the problem here. We are kind of putting this part, which is not related to heading 1, into heading 1 chunk. And the problem here is if we try to embed it, of course, okay, it will still work, everything will work, and the AI, you will be able to chat with your PDF and get some results. However, the quality, the performance will not be as good as, let's say, if we split it in this way, where we would have heading 1 clearly separated from heading 2, right? So basically the problem that we're trying to solve is that each chunk must be as close to itself as possible. Basically, we need to make sure that one chunk is a complete piece of logic and not just being cut in the middle, right? So that's what we need to achieve. Now, for that, there's basically a lot of different ways to do it, and it's not 100% really solved problem yet, I would say. So, for example, as I explained just now, one way is to actually try to create a structure to your PDF, if it's possible, because not all PDFs are perfect. So sometimes you might not be able to create a structure. But let's say if we have a clear structure like I described here, we can actually use the code to be able to structure it in this way, so that then we know, okay, like we should probably chunk it by this way. So heading 1, heading 2 on, or if let's say we have very limited characters, we can chunk it like this. So this would be the first chunk, this would be the second chunk, this would be the third chunk. Okay? So that's kind of like the first thing that we need to accomplish. And then another thing is that we need to pay attention here is we need to make sure that AI kind of knows where is the data coming from. So there is a lot of information that we need to save into our rack, our database, our storage. We need to save the file name, for example. We need to provide as much context as possible about this PDF. So the file name, what is it about, some metadata like category. Because think about it, if AI chat here is a librarian, obviously it will be easier, and RAC is a library, right? Obviously it will be easier for a librarian to be able to find through the books if they have a certain catalog and indexed catalog that they can use to be able to find the books that you need, to answer your question, right? Because let's say if they just have a catalog, okay, maybe they can see the books names. That is nice, but it's still not as helpful to be able to find something, right? But let's say you add a description on top of it. Okay, you have a book description, like quick summary. That would already like improve how fast the librarian can find the book already. That would be nice. And then let's say we also sort everything alphabetically. Okay, now it's even better because, well, librarian probably knows the alphabet, so they can find the book where the answer lays much faster. So this is something that basically, well, software developers, machine learning people, the people that are doing all these behind the scenes work have to make so that, well, you can chat with your PDF. And again, as I said before in the first video and the second video, the model here that you are using, ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, it doesn't matter. All of these is the infrastructure. It's a code that is being built outside of the model, that the AI agents, AI chats, different AI providers have to build for you to be able to reliably chat with your PDF. Because, hey, if you go ahead and try to insert thousands of pages to your ChatGPT, again, your Gemini AI, it will not work. It might accept your files. Maybe it didn't work for me last time, but it might accept your files, but the performance will be awful. Like you won't be able to get your answers accurately. So the way that this data is being chunked, structured, and embedded plays a very, very big role in the performance, in accuracy. So all of those like hallucinations, a lot of them can be improved a lot, right? If we split the text nicely, if we embed it nicely, and we store it correctly. So that's a wrap up. I might cover and go into more details on how all of this works. So basically things outside of the model, outside of ChatGPT. So what else is happening behind the scenes there? So stay tuned. But basically, this is how your AI is able to let you chat with your PDF. And as usual, if you guys like our content and you work in finance industry, for your company use, for your professional use case, we build and deploy specialized AI agents for finance industry. Just go to our profile here, click on this URL and book a call with us. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.